Welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, the J.R. Stewart.
And I'm your co-host, Tommy D. Duncan III, or TD3. Jimmy, it is Wednesday night,
So that
December the
means that
14th.
Black Men Speak.
Absolutely. Wednesday night, December the 14th, 2022, Jimmy. And it is Wednesday night, another thrilling show.
Yes. If you haven't already, please hit the like button so we can get our numbers up. Please spread the word, share about our show, and subscribe. You don't have to necessarily do it in that order, but as long as you get all three done, we'll be happy.
And Jimmy, we are going to talk about a topic that, man, has been in the news for the last couple of weeks. And, I was thinking this would have kind of come and gone, kind of like the Jerry Jones picture in the news. But this one has been sticking around, and Jimmy may be around for a while.
It's a slow news cycle, Tom.
Yeah, well, if we think about who we're talking about, and of course, for those who are just tuning in, we're talking about Deion Sanders and the recent news that after joining Jackson State University, HBCU in Jackson, Mississippi, that he has now taken his talents and services to the University of Colorado as their head coach. But the interesting thing about this, Jimmy, is that it has been headline news pretty solid for the last couple of weeks. And, I'd like to talk about this because, my question is, why is this still top headline news? There's still a lot of chatter. There's still a lot of conversations going on about it, Jimmy. But this is Black Men Speak. And we do talk about the issues that folks are talking about, Jimmy. So it's time to rock 'em sock 'em.
Okay, Tom, let's put some things on the table.
All right, throw your
This,
cards out there.
yeah, I think you can easily make an argument and build a case that this was a promotion, a move up for Dion. You go from HBCU, and this is not to embarrass HBCUs uh, or to put them down in any way. But let's face it, Jackson State compared to Colorado is a major step up. Um, Opportunity to be on TV, a larger viewing audience, larger stadium, better recruitment, more money, more prestige, and especially if you were successful there, like you was at Jackson State, then that would open the door, I think, for a lot more coaches at the HBCU level to move up to Division 1A.
Jimmy, you know, in in principle, I definitely do understand what you're talking about. I was listening to a interview that he did on 60 Minutes. It's probably been a month ago, and I went back and re-listened to that. And one of the things that I found that was very interesting, he said, why did you decide to do this? I mean, we're thinking about Deion Sanders, Hall of Famer, um, Super Bowl champion for two different teams, San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys. Um, he's been successful in his own right. And since he has transitioned from college at Florida State University to the National Football League and has become a superstar, he has been in the news on and off, but he has always been a great marketer of his talents and of his skills. And one thing that I found that was very interesting is that when he had this interview with 60 Minutes, he said, he got a collect call from God, and he had to accept the charges. And in essence, what he said is that sometimes when you get a call from God, he asks you to do something, you have to make a sacrifice. So there are probably a lot of things that he could have done, but he decided to go to Jackson State, become their head coach, and to, in his own words, make that program relevant again.
Well, Tom, he did that, but let's look at what he encountered when he got there. I'm not sure if he had one son or two sons who
Two
played
sons.
here.
He
Okay,
had both sons. One is playing quarterback, and one is playing defensive back. Matter of fact, of course, his oldest son, Shador, was the starting quarterback, and then he had his youngest son, who is the defense. It was a defensive back at Jackson State.
okay. So Here's a person who's not just the coach of the team, Tom, he's also a father. And I saw an interview, a little short clip, that where he spoke more so as a father than a coach. And he talked about the horrendous conditions that he found at Jackson State. This is not to say that this is, well, I want to make sure I put in the right context, Tom, where people understand. Um, Compared to where he came from, he played Division One school at Florida State, a big name school. He played at the pro level. He's used to a certain treatment from playing at that level. And when he got to Jackson State, let's just say the environment was not conducive to produce that kind of environment that he was used to playing in. And to have his sons play in that condition was a concern for him. You know, the little things like uniforms, their tennis shoes. You know, when you come out of a program, you get a new pair of tennis shoes every week, and now you're getting hand-me-downs. That's concerning, Tom. You talked about the food. You know, I'm pretty sure when he played at Florida State, the food was top notch for the athletes. And I'm pretty sure when he played in San Francisco and Dallas, when they traveled, food was top notch. This is not a man who's used to coming from a program where the players have to put up with scraps and I'm not going to say inferior food, Tom. I'm just going to say less than superb food that a Division One school athlete would be used to eating when they travel. And he talked about having to fix that for the kids, not just his kids, but he was appalled that he wanted to do something to change the condition for them, but for other kids who were there. You know, it's like this is an experience that's not going to last forever. And so you need to milk this and get as much out of it as you can. And we want to make your experience under a team that I'm coaching as best as possible. So you talked about having to pull in the athletic director, the president of the university, the chancellor, companies that were supposedly sponsoring the school, but really wasn't giving that much to the school. Bringing all the parties together, Tom, to even things down to the kitchen staff and the cook staff, you know, to change this condition. And so my question is that if you're having to do all of this, Tom, um, and you know that it doesn't have to be this way, why wouldn't you accept an offer from a Division One school like Colorado, where you know that all these things that you're fighting for to put in place at Jackson State are already there? That's the norm there in Colorado. You don't have to fight for tennis shoes. You don't have to fight for uniforms. You don't have to fight for clean helmets, decent equipment. All these things, Tom, are in place. This is the norm at a Division One school. You're not having to make your own Gatorade by putting Kool-Aid, sugar, and a little salt in it, and faking it. You know, I mean, these are schools that already have all the resources in place. So why wouldn't you take the job when offered?
The reason that I'm not going to say he wouldn't inevitably take the job because, one thing that he made very clear is that if he got a good offer, he wasn't going to ignore it. But this is what we've got to consider. You're talking about him making a move that is in his best interest purely for financial needs, as opposed to the rhetoric and the messaging as to why he took the job in the first place, which is to one, make a difference in the life of these kids. And when he said these kids, you're talking about Black kids, African American kids, kids who go to historically Black colleges and universities. And, he put a message out there that resonated with people, and he made some commitments. And the reality of it is, Jimmy, is that with someone, everybody is not a Deion Sanders. There are a lot of great athletes out there. There are a lot of great coaches out there. Many of them probably a lot better than Deion Sanders. But when you start bringing, let's just get down to the 100. When you start talking about God making a move in your life and taking you someplace where you really didn't have to go to, making a difference in the life of not just athletes, but students there as well, because you're talking about making an investment in a program, in a college. And let's be very clear, the entire SWAC. What Deion did in a matter of a couple of years is bring exposure to the inequities of what has happened to a lot of our historically Black colleges and universities, our Black institutions in general that have been chronically underfunded by state government, by federal government, that of course get no favors from corporate America that
But Tom,
clearly,
where are the alumni for these universities?
you know,
Hmm?
the alumni are out there,
So
but
we can
but,
talk
but, but
about
let's but
we can talk
Jimmy,
about what the
wait,
government
wait,
is
wait,
not
wait, wait,
doing.
wait, wait, time out, time out, time out. I understand what you're saying when it comes to alumni. That is a part of this conversation. But when you look at the $1 million contributions, not the 100, the $1,000, the $5,000, but when you're talking about the big money contributions, you're talking about government, you're talking about corporate. Now, what I'm not going to say is that I'm going to expect the government or major corporations that have exploited and, let's be very clear, disappropriated the labor, the wealth, the creativity, and the talent of our ancestors to all of a sudden you say, you know what? Maybe we need to give something back. I'm not expecting all of that. But what I am saying is this: if you have someone who understands our community, because Deion may have went to Florida State, but when he grew up, I don't believe he grew up with a silver spoon. He understands the situation that these kids are in, many of these universities in. He probably didn't know the extent of it until he arrived there. And then, Jimmy, let's talk about it. This is Jackson, Mississippi. This is not Miami, Florida. This is not even Houston, Texas, or Los Angeles, California. Jackson, Mississippi. Last time I looked, I believe Mississippi was, if not the, one of the two poorest states in the United States. All that being said, is there's a difference between making a career move and actually making an investment and making a movement to help the masses. And
So
and
Tom,
that's
I
and
think
that's
the
what and
key.
that's what a lot of people have some ire about in terms of this move.
I think you see the puppets on the stage, Tom, but the one who's pulling the strings eludes you. So here's the thing: governments don't fund football programs for schools. Schools do. There's a certain percentage of your tuition that goes to athletics
Correct.
by law.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so let's clear that up. The second thing, Tom, a lot of things, additional funds that come into a football program, especially a winning football program, is done by the alumni.
Correct.
And
Correct.
uh,
And
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 it
a lot of
doesn't seem
and and,
that
and Jimmy, haven't gone to a school, Texas A&M, that has, if not the most CEOs of corporations in this country, we understand that there's a lot of corporate behind that money that's coming in.
that's true,
And,
Tom.
and- and I go to a school that probably has per capita the most CEOs than any other school in this country.
Understand.
That's why I know that.
And so here's what this Deion Sanders move does, Tom, and it's really a gift. And the gift is that for those who always advocated that you can put the HBCUs on the map, and more of the top black athletes will go to those schools and play rather than go to white Division I schools. And so there's a point to be made here. And maybe those who thought that Deion going to Jackson State was going to be part of that move, because he did recruit and get transfers a lot of um, high visibility athletes. So let's give him that. But here's the thing, Tom, is that the other part of that is that the schools have to do their part. Let's take for example, I don't. When we go to the top 10 Division One coaches, the Sabans of the world, the Jimbo Fishers of the world, just the top 10.
Yeah, I know.
And
I know. There's a top 10. Jimbo Fisher, the sixth highest paid coach in the NCAA, who just led his team to a 5-7 record. That
right,
Jimbo Fisher, who just signed a 10-year extension
for
in
$70 million.
2021 after beating Alabama, and now 5-7.
So you take the top 10 coaches in Division One and add their salaries up, Tom, and I'll be willing to bet that the top 100 HBCUs or 104, whatever the official number is, you take all those coaches and they don't come anywhere near.
Mm.
Um, so, one, the school's going to address the pay inequity. But on top of that, if you want to attract better athletes, then maybe you can't compete against the Division One schools, Tom, but you should be able to compete against the Division Two and Division Three schools. I'm not even sure the HBCUs are doing that. But in order to get there, Tom, it's not going to be a federal government program. It's not going to
No.
be a state government program. It's going to be the alumni and the people coming out of their pocket to help fund those programs, to elevate them so they can do better. And if you to do that, this will become a moot issue.
Well, I can't disagree with you in principle. That is why a move like this, when you have someone with the influence and the pull of a Deion Sanders, is so important to a school like a Jackson State. Matter of fact, it wasn't just important for Jackson State, it was important for the SWAC. Why? Exposure, resources, connections. He went there and he says, you know what? They didn't have the practice field was straight dangerous. Guess what? He had connections in corporate America. Wait. Time out.
How do you not have a practice field that's safe to play on? This is what I'm talking about. How do you expect to compete when you don't even have a practice field, a decent practice field?
And so what he did, he called some of his friends at a Walmart, and guess what? They got a new practice field.
The president or the chancellor of the university couldn't do that?
Jimmy.
Are you telling me that director, nobody at the university
what
could do anything about the condition of the practice field until Deion Sanders came along? That's what you're trying to tell me.
What I'm trying to tell you, in an interview that mainstream media had with the SWAC conference executive, he literally said that Deion was able to do things that we, the conference, was not able to do because of connections. Jimmy, wait, time out.
They didn't want to do it, Tom.
Jimmy, this is business. It has to do with relationships.
It does, Tom.
And what I'm telling you is this. You have folks who are in this tier, and then you may have folks who work for corporations, but there is a difference. He said in an interview that Jackson State now has the second most uniforms on the playing field next to Oregon. Oregon, the same Oregon that is sponsored by Nike. Jackson State has a partnership now with Under Armour. That's a Deion thing. And so I am telling you that this man single-handedly, because of his history, because of his relationships, because of more importantly, his fame, people want to be associated with him. Some of these top 4 and 5 recruits, including the young man who was the number 1 recruit last year, said the reason he went to Jackson State was because of Prime, not because of Jackson State.
I understand that.
That's the impact he has.
But once again, we're talking basic things. I'm an athletic director. I have to put a football team, I got to put sports programs on the field, on the diamond, on the court to satisfy men and women. And that's my job. And you're telling me that if I get hired on as a coach and I step out there in the practice field, it's not even safe to play on. Tom, that doesn't require a superstar Hall of Fame football player to come in and fix.
What that requires, Jimmy, because this didn't come out of Deion's pocket, it requires resources, access to resources that they don't have. You have to understand that we're not talking about a Michigan. We're not talking about a University of Colorado. We're not talking about a Texas A&M. We're not talking about a Miami. We're talking about a Jackson State
No, Tom, we're talking
University.
about putting forth the effort. We're talking about picking the phone up. You'd be surprised what you would get if you just simply ask. It may not take a Hall of Fame football player to call Walmart up for the lawn department to come help us out and fix our football field. It may just take that leg director picking the phone up and doing his job or her job. I'm pretty sure it's him. And
It
making
was
the
a him
phone.
in this case. But Jimmy, if
I'm
someone, if Jimmy, if someone nondescript who you know have no relationship comes in and say, you know what, I want $5 million so we can fix our uniforms. And it's like, you know what, you're not even, number one, you're not getting to the person because you don't know the person. And more importantly, the person doesn't know you. And so they're not writing a check for somebody they don't know because it's a good feel story. The reason that Deion was able to do it is because he was Deion.
Okay,
And
Tom.
that is the reason. And I'm not
So
now. What I don't want to do.
help, Tom.
What I don't want to do is this. I don't want to put the weight of the world on one individual because that
I'm
is
not putting
unfair.
the weight of the world on one individual.
But I
But
will
that's
say
exactly
this.
what you're doing, Tom.
What I will say is this. He was able to get done in 2 years what he got done in 2 years, what they had not been able to do in the last 2 decades.
There are other.
Because of who he was and the connections that
I'd be
he
willing to
had.
bet, Tom. I haven't been to Grambling to compare conditions, but I'd be willing to bet that Grambling is not that much better off than Jackson State. And you had a Hall of Fame coach there. Maybe he wasn't big as Deion, but he was a Hall of Fame coach who had a name.
Mhm.
My point is, Tom, is that there are other coaches who have name recognition coaching at HBCUs.
A few.
A
A
few.
few.
And my point is that you don't have to be a Hall of Famer to get stuff done.
No, not saying that.
So my point is that okay, it may take you a little longer. Maybe if I'm Nick Saban, I can call up Nike, I can call up Under Armour, I can call up a lot of different companies and get stuff. Maybe if I'm the coach at Jackson State, maybe I have to make a few more phone calls. Maybe I have to call someone who knows someone who knows someone. Whatever the effort is, if I want to get those things and put them in place, I do what I have to do, Tom. My point is that we're sitting here, you're building this case around faulty evidence that somehow the HBCUs are being cheated or not being given their fair share when you haven't even determined if they're even making an effort to get a fair share. You can't get what you can't even ask for.
Jimmy, you're assuming that they haven't tried, and what I am telling
No,
you
what
is that
I'm assuming is that we
you can't
don't
assume.
know, Tom.
No, what I'm telling you, Jimmy,
Because
is that
no one's given the interview to say,
but
hey,
Jimmy,
we tried all these routes. We
Jimmy,
tried the Deion route. It didn't work.
the chairman of the SWAC himself says, hey, he has been able to do things that we have not been able to do, which means that we have tried and we have gotten no
Tom,
response.
that means when you say we have not been able to do ourselves, you don't know if he made the effort to do it themselves.
Jimmy, he did. That was, you have to understand what he is saying is that there are certain people that get phone calls back and there are certain people that don't. But before we move that, Jimmy, I'd like to acknowledge a couple of guests who are on our chat line. We'd like to thank Ms. Faye Fleming for joining and listening in today. Thank you very much, Faye, good friend of ours. Mr. Collegiate, Mr. Freddie V. Roberts, Esquire. Thank you for joining us again. And Mr. Michael Patton, who has been on this show a couple of times. He has a couple of comments. Presidents ask for these corporations to partner, and they don't get the response that Deion was able to close because he brought a different motivation to corporations to partner. Look at Tennessee State, a state institution that has not received the legal state allocation of funds. These are things that the state should be funded that they're not getting. Many university presidents come from political and corporate circles that the typical HBCUs don't. Those relationships are a strong force. But thank you for your comments, Mr. Patton. And also, for those of you who are out there, we're going to put in the call-in line. So if you do want to not just join the chat line and provide your thoughts, if you want to call in, call 972-497-27 888-2280. Give us your thoughts, your views,
Well,
whether
if you
they are
call
one way
in,
or
Tom,
another. Yes.
if you call in, start off with whether you're for or against Deion leaving, and then go into
Well,
the.
what relevance is it? Because he's gone now.
Well, you can still let us know whether you agree with him moving or not.
Okay.
I'm just taking my little impartial survey,
Gotcha.
scientific survey here.
Okay, so we're doing a survey. So if he's right or wrong, and then my question, of course, in the topic is, can he be right and wrong? Can we still get along, and where do we go from here?
And if you're putting this much weight on Deion's shoulders for getting stuff done, which he did, okay, what happens now?
He got a lot done. He's got
What
a lot
happens
done.
now?
What happens now is, you know what? The next man
Do,
is as a famous coach for the New England Patriots used to say, next man up. Somebody's got to come in and fill the gap.
so what is this person going to do, Tom? They're going to sit back and, oh, well, we lost our deals. We lost our underwriting. We lost our sponsors. So what's the next person going to do? What now we can't, we're not going to be entitled to receive anything because Deion's gone, and I'm not a Hall of Fame football player that now have the mystique or the swagger that.
No, what you
Deion
do,
brought.
Jimmy, you do what you do, because nobody else can be a Jimmy Stewart but Jimmy Stewart. Nobody else can be a Deion Sanders but Deion Sanders. But you do what you can do. But you cannot take away and or negate what one individual who is maybe a once in a lifetime talent is able to do, even if it's just for 2.5 or 3 years.
Well, yeah, Tom, I'm encouraged by that.
You leverage what you have. And what I will say is this. Depending on who you talk to, that determines whether this is a right or wrong situation.
There is no wrong, Tom.
Folks within that community, when you put your words out there to any community, people hold you to your word. Now, of course, you
Yes,
can cross your word, and you
and
can
I'm pretty
change.
sure
You can change your mind. You can
I'm
change your
pretty
mind
sure
at any
that he
time.
did not imply, Tom, that he was going to be stuck at Jackson State for
No,
life.
no, and I don't believe he ever said stuck, and I don't think stuck is appropriate. But
And I
I
don't
get
think
what you.
wrong is
No,
appropriate, Tom, because
I don't
nobody's
think
been
that.
wronged here.
I don't say it. The question is, was it? I believe it was a 4-year contract, somewhere 300 to $500,000. I want to say maybe $300,000 a year. Okay, it looks like we have a caller, Jimmy. So let me get
All
this
right.
and see what our caller has to say. Good evening. This is Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, Tommy Duncan. Now, welcome. If you could tell us your name, where you are from, and what your thought or question is for this evening's show.
My name's Edward Willis. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas.
Hey, Edward.
Willis.
Hey, man. How you doing?
Doing great. Good to
Willis,
hear from you, Edward.
Yeah, I will say I'm very much in favor of the move that Deion made, because it's just another step in the right direction
There you go.
for African Americans as a whole and African American men in particular, as far as leadership roles. And Deion's going to a school that's in the Pac-12, which probably after the Ivy League has some of the toughest academic standards for getting students into those schools of any conference or group of schools in the country.
True.
Very difficult to get people admitted to a Pac-12 school. So the fact that he's being given the opportunity to do that at $5 million a year with people who don't just throw money away, that they actually want to achieve something, goes to the point that he's actually proven that he has ability, number one. And for us, it's another step in the direction of getting people to understand that African Americans can succeed in a leadership role, whether or not we're in tough conditions, like you guys have been discussing at Jackson State, or whether you are in excellent conditions like they have in Boulder, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'll be successful there.
I agree with you on that.
Reputation will grow. And I think that more African American coaches, in particular, educators is what we really should call them, but coaches in particular, the door is going to open for more of them. And I hope one of the things that Deion does is that he brings in some young, intelligent African American coaches as assistants, quality control people, give them exposure to the big time, give them exposure to the money, give them exposure to a conference of that size, of talking to families, of the recruits that they bring in, of having to communicate on a high level with those families, convince them to come. And if he has a modicum of success there, those other young men are going to be able to go places and have success on their own. And some of them may go back to historically black colleges and coach.
Now, when you mention young men, are we talking about the student athletes? When you say young men, who are we referring to?
I'm talking about young African American coaches.
Oh, coaches. Okay, gotcha. You're talking coaches.
Doing a pipeline
and all these things, and they're looking for opportunities to hone their skills and exposure. Right. They need exposure to other coaches and administrators at college that get to know them and can write letters of recommendation that I know this young man or I know this young woman, and I found that they can do the job. This opens doors. David Shaw did it at Stanford. I hate for the fact that he just left there after, I think, 12 to 15 years. So more and more, we need to be making these kinds of moves. And when we make these kinds of moves, bring people along and educate them. Give them that exposure. You never know where they're going to go back and be able to help. Another thing I want to point out, Deion was making $300,000 at Jackson State. There ain't no way in the world Jackson State should be paying a head football coach $300,000. I don't care if it's Deion or it was Doug Williams at Grambling or whoever the case may be. They don't have the budget for that. Head coach at Harvard, Dartmouth, Yale make under $200,000 a year. All of them. University of Pennsylvania, Brown, Cornell, case goes on and on. The money that come into these universities, and I think part of the reason that and I didn't go to an historically black college, but I have a lot of friends who did, and they don't go back and support these institutions because they can't rep them.
Finally, someone.
Wait a sec, Jimmy. You said, Edward, they don't support their alma maters because of what now?
Because they don't rep them. They can't rep them. They don't feel like they can rep them. They talk about the graduate school they went to. Yeah, I went to Prairie View, but I got my master's degree at University of Michigan.
Right.
I went to University of Chicago to go to law school. Or I went to Florida State to go to medical school or UCLA. That's what they rep. And they will, when they're around us, other African Americans, they say, "Yeah, I went to Prairie View, I went to Grambling, I went to North Carolina A&T, I went to Morehouse."
So what you're saying in essence, it depends.
Morehouse and Howard that get a pass.
What you're saying is
high academic standard.
What you're saying is depends on the community that they're speaking to.
Yeah, but it shouldn't. What I'm saying is it shouldn't.
I understand.
If these colleges take the money that they get and they improve facilities, primarily academic facilities, and they improve the student experience,
housing,
and they actually pay professors more, quality professors more, and build up their academic standing, while at the same time maintaining the athletic programs that they can maintain. And Title IX makes that dicey sometimes. If you want to have a football program, you got to have a lot of women's program to balance off what it costs to have a football team.
Correct. You do.
But you do what you can. But the big thing to be able to draw alumni back in our historically black colleges is that we have to improve what those colleges do on the academic side. And then I think we start to attract more money. Because kids are still going to go there and play football. Because not everybody's a D1 recruit.
Correct.
You're still going to get some quality student athletes to go, and they should be student athletes at our historically black colleges at this point.
Correct.
Student first, athlete second. They'll still be on the field. People will still show up for the games, probably in the same numbers. But you won't spend as much money, especially on a coach. I think $90,000, $115,000 is plenty for a head football coach at a historically black college, not $300,000. And everything else with the assistance equivalent downward, because the money needs to go toward academics and facilities. And I'll leave it at that.
All right. Hey, we appreciate you. Any closing thoughts before we let you off the line? We appreciate your feedback.
Thank you.
There needs, and I know they've started to do more. I have, friends, children who are in historically black colleges now, and they're doing a better job of outreach to alumni. And some of them are starting to get some wealthy African American, didn't necessarily go to that school, to give money. I mean, we do have
and I think that is a responsibility. That is a responsibility that I think that we all must consider, regardless of whether we went to an HBC or a PWI. Because to be quite frank, for a lot of our kids, we understand that there are only so many slots at a lot of these premier PWIs. I mean, including the one that I graduated from. When I was there in the late 80s, aging myself, it was right around 2-something%. It's now 2022. Right. On the reports, it's still about 2-something%. Now, on the other hand, interestingly enough, the Hispanic population during the time that I was there in the late 80s was about 8 to 10%. Guess where it is now? 25%. So that is something that we, regardless of the type of school that we went to, have to take some ownership of and responsibility, because these institutions are not just educating our children, they are to a certain degree building culture with our young people. If they're doing the right thing, they are giving them an experience that they're clearly not going to get, and they're getting the type of preparation, and we're talking historically now with the foundation of our historically black colleges, to give them not only the academic foundation, but the intellectual and the professional acumen in terms of dealing with the real world, which is a different experience at HBCU than it is at a PWI. Nothing wrong with either one of them.
And that's why we need them. That's why we need the HBCUs.
Yes.
And we are in a beautiful place that the Hispanics will never get to. We have our own institutions of higher education, right?
Right.
We have them. They exist. Now we need to support them in the right way. If somebody gives $10 million to Tennessee State, it needs to be earmarked for science building, engineering programs, humanities and things of this nature, so that money doesn't get wasted in some programs that might not be long-term beneficial. We have to have foresight. We have to use our money better than, say, a University of Michigan uses their money. And I'm not saying Michigan makes bad choices. I'm just saying we have to be exact to be able to build our institutions up to the point that they can start to dream about competing with those bigger schools, especially with the fact that money that is owed our HBCUs by state government.
Yes, still.
We're not getting that money.
Still.
We're not getting that money.
Gotcha. Well, hey, we appreciate you, Edward, as always. Of course, we'll have you back soon, and we thank you for calling in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All righty. Now, that's very good feedback from Edward, and we definitely have a couple of comments from our chat line and text messaging from Michael Patton. We can agree that people can be disappointed that Deion left, and people can be happy for the opportunity that Deion has earned as well. And thank you for that, Mr. Patton. And Miss Tammy, I absolutely love what Deion was able to accomplish at Jackson State. What separated him from other leaders was that he not only played the game and did it well, he was able to inspire and motivate players, coaches, staff, and community to accomplish the unthinkable. The reality is coaches are known to stay for short periods of time, possibly 1 to 2 years, et cetera, et cetera. And we want to thank you, Miss Tammy, because you have a lot here to say. But folks, do feel free to call in if you would like to get your thoughts in. And that was from Mr. Edward. He had one perspective. We're open to all perspectives, so do please call in 972-497-2280. Go ahead, John.
The most important thing to come out of Edward's conversation is the aspect of personal responsibility. And, Deion, this wasn't an affirmative action hire. Colorado didn't hire Deion because he was black. They hired him because they figure that he can bring a winning atmosphere to their school.
Jimmy, let's be very clear. Colorado brought Deion there because he knew that whatever he is paying them, that is exponentially smaller than the revenue, the alumni support, the top tier recruits that he has started bringing already. So whatever
turn
he
the program
brings
around and turn it into a winner. That's what schools are looking for.
This is true, Jim. I understand that, Jimmy, but come on. Tell me what other coaches in HBCU programs are being highly recruited by Power 5 conferences. And Deion is not the only successful coach in the SWAC and or any of the other football conferences or basketball conferences, but you don't see Power 5 programs recruiting them. This is the Deion effect. But all that being said, you know, he was able to do a lot. We won't know for a couple of years probably what the economic impact that he has had, not just for Jackson State, not just for the SWAC, but for the city of Jackson as well. And kudos to him because he's, again, brought exposure, opportunity, resources to an extremely blighted area, probably one of the most blighted areas, Jimmy. What people aren't talking about is that there is still a water crisis in Jackson that nobody is talking about. And you know why nobody's talking about it? Because it's Jackson, Mississippi. It's not Connecticut.
Why do I have to talk about it? Why are the folks in Jackson talking about it? My point is that you need to clean your own mess up sometime. You need to be your own
Jimmy. You know what? It's Jimmy. That's real easy to Jimmy. You know what? It's kind of interesting that it's a lot easier, Jimmy. It's a lot easier for that to get cleaned up when it's not a predominantly black town or black.
What, black people can't do a cleanup?
Jimmy, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars that Jackson doesn't have, and that's where you get support from the federal government.
We've had this conversation. I hate to play the church card here, but you're going to force me to.
Okay, play the church card.
I've seen and witnessed with my own eyes, like King said, I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the mega churches being built by black people. I'm not trying to hear this story about how poor black people are when you have some of the biggest mega churches in the country have been built by black people. But when it comes to taking care of your things that you need, somehow you can't spiritualize a solution to get it done.
Well, then maybe we need to get TD Jakes to go out there and solve it himself. Because, I mean, let me be very clear. There are a few black mega churches of that magnitude. And there are, I would say this, the majority of black churches in Black America are very small or maybe small, mid-sized churches. You have a few mega churches. Obviously, we got our fair share in Texas. There's some in Georgia and a few other areas, but the majority of the black churches are very small and or mid-sized churches. They cannot solve that type of problem. Let's not steal
about the numbers here. What I'm talking about is potential. What I'm saying is that we've seen what we're capable of doing.
Correct.
We're not helpless people.
Correct.
We're people that we put our mind to, we get things done. So whatever resources are out there, okay, you tap into them. Whatever resources that are not out there, you still do what you have to do to get it done because it's important.
Correct.
So you got to have that mindset of some personal responsibility is what I'm talking about.
Can't disagree with you in terms of personal responsibility. What I will say is this, as we go into the last 15 minutes or a quarter of our show. And by the way, let me know, Jimmy, if you have that video.
We do have a clip from DR.
If we still need to show it at this point.
Okay. Let's see if we can pull it up and see what you think from the man himself.
A tremendous impact in the HBCUs. I guess, how difficult was the decision to leave what you started there?
Tremendous. Because it wasn't about the X's and O's or the wins and losses. It was about those kids. It was about looking at the faces of those kids, knowing that I'm being ready. God is getting ready to elevate me. God is getting ready to elevate me. Usually a coach is terminated or elevated. Thank God I'm elevated. But still, the journey is not complete. Some of the things that we accomplished there about bringing understanding and notoriety to certain falsities or non-committal things that are done in Power Fives, maybe God is using me to be the catalyst to make you think and to make you just fathom another way, to to make us feel unthreatened when someone other ethnicity is approaching, to just make us feel good about today. Maybe God is really using me to open doors at this level. The thing that alarms me the most is just because I'm leaving Jackson, they think that I'm leaving African American. I don't know if you noticed or not, but I'm black. I can never leave who I am and what I am and how I am and how I go about being that. So it is still my task to look in that locker room and see 65 to 70% of African American men trying to help them get to the next level, as well as all the others. My calling is for young men, young women, and people of all walks of life, all social climates, and all ethnicities. That's my calling. My calling is not built on a location. It's built on a destination. Now that was good. You're supposed to clap for that.
Okay, Tom. Deion being Deion, he
Yes.
says all about the destination,
Mhm.
not the location.
Mhm.
What say you?
It sounds good, Jimmy. He goes from an area of great need to an area of great opportunity. I definitely wish Deion the best. I believe he will be successful in whatever he does. And let's be very clear: it's not very hard to be successful with a program that was 1-11 this past year. And so I think that with his energy, with his charisma, I think with what he's able to bring to University of Colorado, he will be successful. We have another college coming in, Jimmy, so let's see what
Okay.
he has to say. Good evening. This is Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, Tommy Duncan. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you could tell us your name, where you are from, and what your thoughts are for this evening's show. Hello, are you there?
This is Frederick Roberts. How you doing?
Thank you so much for calling in, Mr. Roberts. Welcome. We thank you for calling in.
Welcome.
And thank you for supporting our show.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts this evening?
I see you got a delay in this thing. Okay.
Okay. Yes, it is a slight delay.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts
Well,
for
my
this evening?
thoughts, one, Deion Sanders has a right to do what he's done. Okay. But
Are you there?
okay, yeah, but here's what I'm saying. The first thing I want to say is I was really disappointed in the way he handled the departure because
The phone connection.
Because what? Are you still there? You were saying that you were disappointed in the way that he handled the departure.
right. He decided to he deprived the students of the celebration of the SWAC championship.
Yeah, he could have waited. He could have delayed until after the championship. Let that set in and marinate a little bit more before he took the job. That's true.
Yeah, Jimmy said he probably could have waited. So what are your thoughts on the big picture and the impact of what he has done, Brother Roberts, and his departure? And I think that maybe even more importantly, what happens next? Are you there?
Mm-hmm.
We have to give Brother Roberts a call back in. Maybe have a bad connection.
Well, I give him credit for what he's done, but all SWAC schools ain't benefiting from nothing he did. Because one, the fact that he's going to 1-11 school, and then he's taking all the players that he recruited to Jackson State. Jackson State is going to be in a worse state than it was before he got there.
Well, that just means they have to reload. They have to go out and recruit.
You're correct. They are definitely going to have to go out and recruit because obviously his son, the quarterback, which is arguably the most important position, on a football team, is going to be leaving for Colorado, and it's not been determined yet whether the number one recruit that he brought in from last year, whether he's going to stay or leave. I believe his youngest son, who is a defensive back, is at this point staying there. So you are probably right. There probably will be some some athletes, some student athletes who do leave, and I believe obviously he is taking a few coaches with him as well. But obviously he did recommend one of his offensive coordinator to be the head coach, who is now the head coach at Jackson State. So I guess there's a lot of story left to tell.
Yeah, here's another point I wanted to raise. It may sound trivial, but the athletic director at University of Colorado, told the public that he didn't even have the money they're going to pay Deion Sanders. So they are building their life. They're building the alumni support for their school, the contributions from their school on the fact that they got Deion coming there.
Correct.
Now, you got the clip, I'm sure, where he said he don't have no money.
Right. I saw that. He said he didn't have the money yet that he promised, but based upon the anticipated alumni support and contributions, that he feels very confident that they will have that money.
Tom, repeat that, please.
What he was saying is that in an interview, what he was saying,
he would have done that for a black school? Hell no.
Yeah. What he's saying, Jimmy, is that the athletic director during an interview had admitted that they don't have the money in hand right now to pay Deion in his contract, but based upon the alumni, Colorado, the athletic director of Colorado said that he admitted that they don't have the money right now to pay that contract, but he expects that based upon donor support and alumni support, boosters, et cetera, that they will be able to get that taken care of. And that was what Mr. Roberts was stating. Anything else you have to say, Brother Roberts?
Yeah, well, hey, I say, say la vie to him. God bless him. Black folks always help black folks get to the top, and then white people take them and they go.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much for calling in. We appreciate your support, my brother.
Okay.
All right. That was Brother Frederick V. Roberts. And I want to acknowledge, before we get back to the last, 8 minutes of our show, we do have a couple of other comments on the chat line. I want to thank Edward Willis, who came in a little bit earlier. Audrey Booker, thank you so much. Audrey, it said, I feel that Deion, being already famous, didn't have to break his contract. If he was led by God as to his primary purpose, God would have helped equip Deion with the purpose. Deion sold out for the money. And then last thing is Edward Willis, boosters pay the coach's salary.
So that's correct. They do chip in a lot of, especially for the big salaries. So Tom,
yes,
the HBCUs, the footprint and the plan is already there. We don't have to go reinvent the wheel. What you have to do is dust off the plan and try to make it work for you. Now, will you be able to attract the kind of boosters of an Alabama or big D1 school right away? No. It may take time, Tom, but this is something that you work towards to make happen. Not sit back and say, oh, woe is me because we don't have this in place.
Gotcha. So, question, what happens next? So we're talking to communities, and this is what I see, Jimmy. Okay, wait a second. Looks like we have another caller coming in, so let me answer this call.
Caller?
Okay. Good evening. This is Black Men Speak. Your co-host, Tommy Duncan. If you could tell us who you are, where you are from, and what your thought or question is.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Tanya, and I am from DeSoto.
Hey, Tanya.
Thank you. I'd like to say, watching all of this from, I know you all think girls don't watch football, but we watch football sometimes, but it's bigger than football here. Let me say this. Jimmy asked the question, are we for Deion leaving, or are we, against him leaving, or something of that nature? I would say this. Deion is not Black Jesus. Deion came there, and he did bring an amazing brand with him. Deion Sanders Primetime is a brand. And yes, it is a mighty brand known all across the country. So Deion did bring a lot of brand with him, and therefore he could get a lot of things done that the average man or woman that may have taken that position cannot get done. It is true, and it has been true all of my life, that it's not what you know, but who you know. And I've watched in corporate America. I've watched it, on other sides of the spectrum. that it really is who you know. And again, don't forget, Deion is a brand. Now let me say this in closing. I do think Deion made a decision that he felt like he needed to make. How about we not bash him for leaving and simply say, well, the brother left a model for the next coach to come through. He left a momentum for the next coach to come through. And I think that we should let that man move on, and I think we should learn from him. And sometimes some of us are just farmers, and I believe Deion was just a farmer. He dropped the seed, the plan, and then he moved on. I think we should too, and let the man live.
Thank you so very much. Those very important thoughts.
Ditto what
Absolutely.
Tanya
Thank you
just
very
said.
much for calling in.
Yeah, ditto what Tanya just said. I agree with her 100%, Tom.
All right, Jimmy. And go ahead.
I was going to say, Tom, the sad reality, though, is that things are going to go back to business as usual with Deion gone.
You may be correct. I certainly hope not, Jimmy. I believe that this is a once in a generational opportunity to have someone of his magnitude to be at your program, to provide visibility, to open some doors. I mean, think about this, Jimmy. How many other coaches of HBCUs have you ever seen on 60 Minutes? I don't remember, and I haven't been around as long. Maybe Eddie Robinson. Wait. Let me back up. Eddie Robinson, that's one. So Deion would make two.
Yes.
But the question that we move forward with is, let's talk about the state of our historically Black colleges, because I remember, Jimmy, when, not getting too far off base, when one Jimmy Johnson went to a University of Miami, which wasn't really known as an athletic school.
No, it wasn't.
It was an academic school. But because of his prowess, thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. He said actually Eddie Robinson and Doug Williams, because Doug Williams, of course, was a former NFL star and Super Bowl winner who became the coach at Grambling. So that would be Eddie Robinson and Doug
Williams on 60 Minutes because of his coaching, 60 or was he on there because of the Super Bowl win?
It was because he was Doug Williams. It was because he was Doug Williams.
Otherwise, because of the Super Bowl win, black quarterback.
Well, that's part of what made him that Doug Williams. But all that being said is that when Miami became a juggernaut in the football realm,
millions of dollars.
You look at their enrollment, you look at alumni, you look at booster support. It makes a massive difference in the economics of your school. And so the statement is, he opened up some doors and an opportunity, but when we talk about the ongoing conversation about institutions that support our community and our kids, we have to take ownership and responsibility that they are getting what they need, regardless of whether that may be our institution or not. I know I have written several checks to historically Black colleges and universities over the years for one or the other reason. And regardless of whether we went to an HBCU or a PWI, these are institutions that are responsible for generating the leaders and the future of our community. So we have to own that, Jimmy, bottom line.
Tom, that is true. I did see an interview with, I think it was one of the coaches that came after Jimmy Johnson, Erickson.
Dennis Erickson.
So he talked about how the medical school, how the law school, how that entire campus went from a city college, city university, to being what it is now, brought on the backs of football revenue. And so it was a little disingenuous for the president of Miami to speak of Miami as if it was an academic school when really it was built on sports. But my point is that, Tom, we can do this. Winning has a way of attracting and taking care of problems. The more you win, the more attention you bring to yourself. Hopefully, you got to find a way to monetize winning, to continue to win and to improve your facility. So hopefully the schools can get there, but I have a sneaky suspicion that 2-3 years from now, Tom, it'll be business as usual. Jackson State will be what Jackson State was before Deion came in. Probably an unsafe practice field yet again because no one maintained it.
Well, hopefully that new practice field We'll be around for a long enough time that that won't be an issue. And as we close out this show, Jimmy, I would say that anyone out there, regardless of what your background, what your ilk is, what school you went to, regardless of what your opinion is on what Deion or anybody does for that matter when it comes to coaching at a Jackson State, or if you talk about a Tennessee State, where you have Eddie George, who was also a Hall of Fame great
Yes.
for the Tennessee Titans. If you do have a concern about our young people and our students and our futures, write a check to one of those institutions.
And you don't have to be an alum of the school to
school.
write the check, Tom.
Excuse me?
You don't have to be an alum of the school to write the check.
And that's my point. Well, regardless of whether you went to an HBCU or a PWI, regardless of whether they are known for their football program like a Grambling or a Southern or now maybe a Jackson State or whatever that institution is, if you have a concern about the future of our kids, because more of our Black leaders traditionally have come from HBCUs than all of the PWIs combined,
together, that's true.
Write a check, support them. Make sure that you hold them accountable just like you would the person behind that pulpit, and make sure you're making that money do its work. Jimmy, closing comments before we close tonight's show.
Good, Tom. I agree with your closing comment 100%. So, we need to put our money behind the things that we feel that we deem important. So
Right.
This is important enough for us to be upset about. It's important enough for us to write a check and support the schools,
right?
So they can do better.
Because the most important thing, Jimmy, that we have to understand is, our HBCUs lack the endowments, that the harvest.
We have to do a show on that, Tom.
Exactly. And that is what helps pay those teacher salaries. That is what helps make sure that those academic programs are solid. That is what makes sure that those students are getting the housing and the things that they need to, building the endowments. And that's what we have to be about. We can talk about it or we can be about it. That's what I have for tonight.
All right. We'll see you guys again next week. And until then,